Hey there, folks. It's the 30th of July, 2026. Today is Thursday, and things are not great right now in the U.S. As you may or may not have noticed, things are kind of bad right now in our country, and I'm not saying this for no reason. You know, we have unaccountable secret police who are disappearing people from our streets. They're taking people from schools, hospitals, airports, even courtrooms. So even if you're in the process of directly complying with the dictates of the state, they'll still take you. So things are not great in the U.S. right now. We have a lot of challenges. People are going hungry. There's been millions of people who have been surviving because of access that they had to federal food programs, where the federal government was giving them access to funds that they could use to feed their families. But it's not like that anymore. They took away access to that funding, and now there's a lot of hungry people in the U.S. Similarly, they also have taken away access to Medicaid for a lot of people, including veterans, have had their benefits cut. And they're cutting back on housing vouchers, so people who previously had access to federal funds that allow them to stay inside of their home, they no longer have those funds. And cutting back on access to heating assistance, which also covered air conditioning. So the people needed climate control to be able to survive in whichever environment they're in. Like where I'm at, we need air conditioning if we're going to stay inside. Not so much if you go outside, you can find some cool areas, but inside, if you're trying to stay inside, you need to have air conditioning. Otherwise, you're going to overheat pretty quickly. And even being outside, you want to get to like a low place or somewhere in the shade so that you can not overheat, because the climate retreat is an immediate need. Okay, guys? People in places like Texas, or even in Minnesota, people are experiencing the severity of our climate changing to such an extent that the air is unhealthy to breathe, or they should say unbreathable. The air is unbreathable because if you breathe it, it's going to cause ailments. You should not breathe that air, but instead of saying don't breathe the air, they say it's unhealthy to breathe. So, places that have HVAC systems that are able to scour the smoke, they're going to be really, really essential for us to survive as the air becomes unhealthy to breathe. But, in the south right now, it's so hot down there. And honestly, it's hot in the north. If you look at a wildfire map for the world, it's going to be, if you're not aware, it's going to be shocking to you, because there are huge swaths of the planet that are on fire right now. And it's areas that typically don't see a whole bunch of fires in the winter time, because it's winter in the southern hemisphere. And a lot of the southern hemisphere is on fire. The fires that we see here are actually smaller than what they have in the south. So the need for climate retreat is a very pressing and immediate need. People can't just hunker down in situations where the environment has become unlivable. You know, that's actually happening here in Oregon at the Warm Springs Tribe, Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. It's burning up there. They have a lot of fire right now. They have so much fire that they can't, it's not contained, okay? It's uncontained. They can't put enough personnel on the line to effectively stop it or contain it. You know, all they can do is try and protect some of the structures. But they've already lost, I believe, 6 structures. And I was listening to the tribal, I don't think he's the chairman, maybe he's I can't remember his role, maybe the chief financial officer. But he was saying that they're intergenerational housing. So where the Warm Springs people are, they'll have 3 or more generations in one home. So you have the grandparents, you'll have the parents, and the children all living together, or more. So when you lose one house in a setting where it has 3 different families living there, you're not just displacing the people. We're so conditioned to thinking of a home as being a single family home. But the way that it works at Warm Springs is you'll have 3 families. You'll have 3 families living in one home. So when one home burns down, it doesn't just displace one family. It displaces three entire families. So losing 6 homes at the Warm Springs Tribe, they already are at a deficit of housing, like most of the country is. They have more people who need homes than there are homes. They need something like 400 houses just to, you know, put enough houses in stock for the people who are already part of their nation. And now it's going the other way because they're losing houses to this wildfire. So right now, a lot of the country is on fire. We have wildfires all over the place. And it's part of this larger climate change that is wreaking havoc on the whole world. And for us to survive this, we have to be very adaptable. We have to be willing to change. And it's clear to me that a lot of people can't adapt. They're not able to change and make, you know, we have so many challenges, right? We have so many challenges that we have to change not just in one way. We need dramatic change. We need change on a huge scale because the systems that we've been pushed into are dysfunctional. We're all existing under these principles that decay the world around them. And for us to try and create a livable planet and a society that has common decency and shared values, it's going to take a lot of different change. So not just the way that we relate to money and politics, not just the way that we relate to healthcare and education. You know, we really have this huge challenge ahead of us as far as adapting to many changes all at once. And Like, I get so stuck in my own ways that trying to even just change one thing is difficult for me. So then to try and change many things all at the same time, that's really hard. It's really hard. And for a lot of us, we go into this is what I was just listening to yesterday, right? We go into a fight or flight mode or freeze. And there's only a few of us that when there's danger, we look towards it and run towards the danger to try and figure out what we can do to help. For most of us, we have a instinct towards self-preservation that makes us run away from things that are dangerous. And for a bunch of us, we also freeze when something is dangerous. Right now, there's so many dangers. There's so many dangers in our environment, and it's not the dangers that we're accustomed to, where it's a predator in the grass. Instead, it's a danger that is to do with like oligarchy and their willingness to create a world of artificial intelligence where technocrats live in bunkers under the earth or on the moon, and the rest of us have to try and survive breathing unhealthy air, as they call it unhealthy. You have to breathe unhealthy, or don't try to reduce the amount of outside time that you have today because the air is at unhealthy levels. Sorry, just breathing too much unhealthy air. Yeah, the thing with like all of the data centers. Sorry, the mic is bumping my head. I hope the audio is okay for you guys. But the thing with all these data centers destroying the water, destroying the air, creating these massive blow torches of heat, just pumping heat, hot air, and heated water straight into the environment. Meanwhile, the water it pushes out and the air it pushes out is full of PFAS. So then it's like contaminated with forever chemicals. These things are just practically unimaginable when you look at the harm that they're doing. And then the number of people who derive benefit from it is so small. And, it's this class of predatory oligarchs who are taking all of this money off of whichever next boom comes along. 100 years ago, it was the railroads, and now it's the AI boom. And it's the exact same families. The people who came in here and stole land, genocided people to build their railroads, are the same people who are now doing the same thing for AI data centers. And it comes down to wealth and influence, because they're able to basically take the reins of power, and the people who are supposed to represent us instead represent these powerful oligarchs who are just like looting the treasury and setting the planet on fire. There's a post going around that says we should name hurricanes after the corporations who funded the climate change. And it's an example of the modern age, that we know the technocrats are causing this, or the oligarchs are causing this climate collapse. And rather than showing them a guillotine or a hemp rope, instead what we're doing is honoring them by naming disasters after them. It's like, I don't know, we need to figure out how we're going to regain some sense of control over the most essential aspects of our lives. The crisis at Taylor Farms, with all of the contaminated lettuce causing hospitalizations of people because they're, you know, have their food source was contaminated with probably human feces, you know, that points to a larger problem of centralization of control, because this one farm produces so much of our food stock that when they are proven unworthy of our trust, there's virtually, I mean, there are still choices, but there's so little choice outside of the control of these few people that if they decide to put some horrific contaminant into our food, it just goes out over this huge scale. There's, you know, there are all of these smaller farms that produce our food, but Taylor Farms, you know, it's similar to a monopoly. They have so many different products, they have so many different contracts, they have so many little subsidiaries that they end up with a massive portion of the overall market. So when they're proven to be unsafe or dangerous, it has a massive disproportionate effect. And you know, they decided to do that, right? They could have much better standards. They could have food safety or worker safety, because what's suspected, you know, who knows how true it is that the workers didn't have a good bathroom break. They weren't given enough time off from their farm work to be able to go to the restroom, and instead they had to relieve their bowels in the garden. So in the crops where they're bringing in our food for us to eat, they're not even allowed to go to the bathroom. They're not given enough time from their work to go to the bathroom, and instead having to take a dump in the field. And that's why we got food poisoning. So they could have adequate bathroom breaks, they could have adequate facilities, they could have, you know, basic human dignity, but would rather pursue profits at the expense of human wellness. Not just the wellness of the farm workers, but also our wellness, because we end up with food poisoning. So, you know, we have layer upon layer upon layer of challenges. Like, the food poisoning thing shows us how important it is for us to have our own food sovereignty. Because without food sovereignty, we're susceptible to dangerous food, okay? But not just that, but also exploitation of farm workers. If we had food sovereignty, the farm workers would be less susceptible, because we would have more control over our food sources. But right now, it's a situation where our food isn't the only crisis, right? Food is just part of the larger batch of crises we have going, and most of them are essentially self-inflicted, because we could have the solutions. Like, nearly half of all of our food in the US gets thrown in the garbage, and if we had more food sovereignty, we were more invested in our food sources, then we would be less willing to throw our food into the trash. And again, it comes back to this oligarchy where they would rather have profits than let people eat, to the point where they would rather throw the food into the trash than allow it to be consumed by people who are hungry. And, you know, it's part of the whole thing is a crisis of conscience. because we just don't have the right frame of mind to be decent human beings to each other. That's actually plenty of water. Anyway, we have a lot of challenges right now. And, my feed on here is heavily suppressed. It's bizarre to me how few views I get on my content. And I'm sure it's because I post a lot of things that are considered unpalatable to the oligarchs. So they put my content at the bottom of your feed. And it ends up being really discouraging, right? Because if I do take the time to put out videos and write things and put out content, and it just gets suppressed, it's like, who am I even putting it up there for? Just for my agent to look at. That's one of the things in my life that's also difficult for me to complain about my own stuff for a minute, is just that these federales have already come at me one time and put me away inside of their little system. Even though it was for less than 24 hours, it still made the point that they can come for you whenever they want. And so I kind of live with that in the back, not even the back of my head, right up front, that they could come for me whenever they feel like it. And they have already, one time anyway, that they put me inside. But whenever I'm out there in the world, I feel it. I feel that experience of having my speech weaponized against me, because I know they could do it again. They could, anytime they feel like weaponizing my speech against me, they could. They're just at this point deciding not to, or maybe they have decided to and they just haven't put together their whole plan yet. I don't know. But whenever I go out there, I feel that potential that they could ambush me again. They're doing that to people. They're ambushing people. And last time, interestingly, the way they got me last time is they used the flock cameras. They used the license plate readers to track me. And then once they figured out where I was at with the license plate readers, they ambushed me. They didn't wait to get a warrant. They got their warrant after they ambushed me. And now they don't even have to get a warrant to ambush people. They can just do that, and they don't have to get, the people who they do ambush aren't entitled to a hearing or trial or to appear in front of a judge. They can ambush people exactly like they did to me, allege that they are an immigrant, and then without trial or any access to due process, render a person to a third-party country where they might be subject to human rights violations. And they have been. One of the places that we're rendering people to now is Liberia, where they have a human market, where they sell slaves in Liberia. The way that the way that I personally am susceptible to that potential treatment is terrifying, and it keeps me cautious. And yeah, the way that they are rendering people to third-party countries without trial, without any due process is terrifying, because what they did to me 6 years ago, if they did it again now, they wouldn't have to get a warrant. They wouldn't have to give me access to a trial or a lawyer or a judge. They could just banish me anytime they feel like it. All they have to do is do like they did last time and say that I'm from another country, right? Even though I literally, actually I went to Mexico a couple of times, but aside from right at the border, I never really left the country. I haven't been to Canada. I haven't even been to any of our territories. I've only been inside of the United States and like right at the border at like Agua Prieta and Juarez. Like I haven't even been to Tijuana, or Acapulco. Like I was born here and raised here and lived here my whole life. I'm not any kind of an immigrant. In fact, I'm indigenous, which is even more offensive that they try to claim I'm from another country when I'm actually Native American. So, I live with that fact that they could ambush me and render me to another country without trial. I live with that. They tried to do that once before 6 years ago, but they had to get a warrant at that time, and the judge did give them one, but with much harumphing, I guess, if you will. But yeah, I know they could do that again. And I think about it. So anyway, that's enough of complaining about my own personal life. I've been trying to make this channel about how things are not great in the U.S. because I don't want to be shy about how things have changed. I don't want to be uncertain about the difficulties that we face, and I don't want to be unrealistic about how hard it's going to be going forward. Because right now it's still just the beginning, right? They went for the migrants, and now they're going for leftists. So it's just a matter of time before they've been going for Muslims. It's just a matter of time before they come for you, whatever protected class you might think that you are. It just hasn't become your turn yet. And all they have to do is change whichever group of people out from, Muslims to immigrants, from immigrants to trans people, from trans people to leftists, from leftists to homeless, from homeless to who knows who's next. Somebody, you might actually know, I don't know. Autistic people, disabled people, Jewish people, Satanists, I don't know, whoever it is that they don't like. It could even be Lutherans, right? Because Lutherans are so kind-hearted and generous in ways that other Christians aren't. They might just decide the only good Christians are the ones who are like the hell, fire, and brimstone Christians, and anyone who isn't hellfire and brimstone is a false Christian. But, things have got to change. And I think we're past the point where incremental change is going to get there. We need such a dramatic change now that it's hard to comprehend. As I was saying earlier, there's so much difficulty, there's so many challenges, that the change is beyond just one aspect of our lives. We have so many different things that are catastrophic in the failures that it can be off-putting. It's hard to get your feet under yourself and figure out what to do next when you have a wide variety of difficulties that you have to face all at once. Like, take for instance the cutting of federal funds. Okay, if you get your food money cut and you have to figure out how you're going to get enough food, that's one difficulty. That in and of itself can be overwhelming. But then they also cut off your medicine. So now you have to figure out how you're going to get enough food and where you're going to get medicine. But then they take away your housing voucher. So now you don't have a home, you can't get any food, and you can't get any medicine. So you have to figure out housing, food, and the ground and sleep. So then when you're not trying to get your food or enough of the essential medicine, and it's like all of these things compound, and then you have to try and figure out so many different things all at the same time that it becomes overwhelming. And then you start neglecting your food because you're trying to find a safe place to sleep, and then you can't even really think about medicine because you're having a hard enough time sleeping or getting food. So that's what it's like right now as a society, as a planet, because we have war, we have data centers, we have fossil fuels. We have like all of these things that are catastrophic and in crisis that it's impossible to focus on all of them. So, we're having to figure out some really challenging things right now. And so, just encourage you that if you're having a hard time, then try to remember to take a couple of deep breaths and make sure you're drinking enough water. And between those things, if you're taking enough deep breaths and you're remembering to drink some water, then give yourself a little reassurance, because you're a person who deserves it. And if you can't give yourself some reassurance, take some reassurance from me. You're going to get through this, and whatever is behind you, let it be behind you. Look forward, figure out what you can do next, because we're going to have to keep putting one foot in front of the other until we get to the other side of this. And it's going to be a lot of work, but you know what? I believe in you. So with all that said, I'm going to let you guys go.